Like to welcome Dr. It's been a while since we've had Dr. Nick here, and so just briefly wanted to welcome him again to the center. As we know, Dr. Nick has been instrumental for decades in setting up really cornerstone organizations like Tushita and Kurukula and Wisdom Publications and Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. So it's a real honor to have Dr. Nick with us again. And whenever you're ready, we have, if you would like to do the refuge in bodhicitta, and then the center will offer a mandala for auspiciousness.
Me?
If you'd like to do the refuge in bodhicitta, and then we will do the mandala.
Okay. Sangye chodam zoge jonam la chanchu balu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chejinge pesonam ki rola penche sangye dupa sho. Sangye chodam zoge jonam la chanchu balu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chejinge pesonam ki rola penche sangye dupa sho. Sangye chodam zogi chonam la changchu baru da ni gyapsu chi dagi chojinge pesonam ki rola penje sangye drupa sho.
This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandiryataya.
Okay, well, good morning again. Let's just start with 2 or 3 minutes meditation on the breath. I think probably everybody knows how to do this. Just, focus on your breath going out and coming in through your nostrils. Focus at that point. And don't allow yourself to become distracted by anything whatsoever. Just keep your mind firmly on your breath. So now think, the purpose of our life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. And that depends upon studying, thinking about, meditating on, and realizing the entire path to enlightenment, graduated path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim. And also depends on meditating. Therefore, I'm going to participate in this workshop on Buddhist meditation in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So, like that, generate bodhicitta for what we're going to do today. So as you know, bodhicitta motivation is the principal cause of enlightenment. And we can actually make everything we do 24 hours a day into a cause of enlightenment by doing that activity with bodhicitta. And especially if we're engaging in some Dharma activity like this workshop, we definitely have to make sure that we're motivated by bodhicitta in order to get the most out of it. Okay, so Buddhist meditation is a pretty big topic, and generally speaking, impossible to deal with in a short workshop like this. But unfortunately, I don't know much about it, so maybe I'll have trouble even filling these few hours. Still, let's see. So I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about the mind. I think one of the links, I don't know if you saw the links that I'd suggested for this. Actually, before we start, so we'll do a couple of hours and then break for lunch. Is that the deal? And then have an hour and then come back at
we can do whatever possible for you, Dr. Nick. Right now, the schedule says we go till noon Santa Fe time, so 2 hours, and then break for an hour and a half and then back again. But if you want to change that slightly, that's totally up to you.
No, that sounds good. Hour and a half is okay for everybody? Not too long?
We would be going till noon, so
okay, so let's see how we feel at noon.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the links was to something I wrote as an introduction to this book, Teachings from Tibet. And actually its previous incarnation was Teachings at Tushita, which I published in Delhi when I was running the center there, Tushita Center, as Venerable mentioned, back in late 70s, early 80s. So I call it an outline, the path to enlightenment. I'm just going to read the first bit, which talks, well, there's a general introduction, and then there's a little bit about the mind. So since meditation is an activity we do principally with the mind, we really need to be clear what the mind is. And so that's why I want to mention that. So the preamble, though, is that the Buddha taught so that beings would be happy and satisfied, so that, we all want to be happy and satisfied. Having attained the ultimate happiness of enlightenment himself, out of love and compassion for each sentient being, he wanted to share his experience with them all. But he could not transplant his realizations into the minds of others. He couldn't remove their suffering by hand or wash away their ignorance with water. He could only teach them to develop their minds for themselves as he had done. Thus, he showed the path to enlightenment. So, this always comes at the beginning of the teaching, Lam Rim teaching on refuge, that, the way the Buddha helps us is by showing us the path, and that, and he can't do these other things. If he could, we'd already be enlightened. So in terms of the nature of the mind, there are two kinds of beings with mind, Buddhas and sentient beings. Two kinds of beings with mind. Buddhas were once sentient beings, but through engaging in and completing the practice of Dharma, they fully purified their minds of both gross and subtle obscurations and attained enlightenment. There are also two kinds of sentient being, those beyond psychic existence and those within. Those beyond psychic existence have purified their minds of the gross obscurations, but not the subtle. Sentient beings within cyclic existence are suffering from both levels of obscuration and are under the control of the disturbing negative minds, the delusions, and their imprints on the consciousness, karma. So those beyond sentient beings, beyond cyclic existence, are free from the gross obscurations, but not the subtle ones. They're called obscurations to knowledge. And those subtle imprints of the gross delusions on our mind are what prevent us from reaching enlightenment, even though we might have escaped from samsara by transcending our ego. So the analogy of those two levels of obscuration often given is if you're cooking onions in a pot and you burn them, there's this kind of gooey black mess at the bottom. You can scrub the pot clean till it looks very shiny, almost new. But then if you smell it, you can still, the smell of the burnt onions lingers even though it looks clean. So even though we can purify our mind of gross delusions, ignorance, attachment, aversion, so forth, even though we can purify our mind of those and attain liberation, still having acted under the influence of those gross delusions since beginningless time, they've left their mark, such as it is on our formless mark on our consciousness, and so then they gradually have to be removed as we develop on the bodhisattva path to enlightenment. So then the mind or consciousness, so those words are synonymous, is formless, just like empty space. It has no shape or color. But unlike empty space, This formless mind also has the property of awareness, the ability to perceive objects. Additionally, the mind is impermanent, that is, changing from moment to moment. So, superficially we see that when we're trying to meditate on the breath. Our mind won't let us remain on the breath. It wants to jump off the breath, almost immediately. When we bring our mind to the breath, it wants to go away, follow some thought or that other impulse. So the mind is impermanent, changing from moment to moment. So we talk about a stream of consciousness. So all impermanent phenomena are the products of causes. Thus, so is the mind. So the mind is a result of the cause. It does not arise from nothing. Furthermore, since effects, so as an impermanent phenomenon, the mind is an effect of a cause, result of a cause. Since effects must be similar in nature to their principal causes, the principal cause of the mind must also be a formless entity able to perceive objects. And not some material substance such as the brain. So the two principal characteristics of the mind, the way the mind is defined in Buddhism, it's divided just by two words, literally clear and knowing. So the clear means what I said before, formless. It has no shape or color. So if the mind is a product of causes, the principal cause must also be formless. And its other quality of cognition or knowing, clear and knowing, so its principal cause also has to have that property. So the brain is neither clear nor knowing, it's just a lump of stuff. So it can't be the principal cause of the mind, which is clear and knowing. In other words, the mind proceeds from a previous state of mind. Each thought moment is preceded by a prior thought moment, and there's never been a first. Moreover, each being's mind comes from its own previous continuity and not from another mind, such as some cosmic consciousness or the minds of one's parents. Hence, each individual's mind is beginningless. And just as physical energy never goes out of existence, disappearing into nothingness, so too does mental energy continue forever. Only its state changes. So I don't know what the latest in physics is, but was it Einstein who postulated that just mind, form and energy are interchangeable, and when form breaks down, it doesn't disappear into nothingness. It changes into its constituent particles, atoms, subatomic particles and so forth, and floats around and later can coalesce, but it doesn't disappear into nothingness. So in the same way, neither does the mind. It doesn't come out of nothingness and it doesn't go into nothingness. It's been in existence since beginningless time and will continue until endless time. So we've kind of caught it at this moment when we can understand that and try and do something about our future mind to make sure that it continues improving and doesn't degenerate. So let's just do a quick meditation here on mental continuity. So again, sit in meditation posture. We'll talk about that a little in more detail in a little bit. But I think you know how to sit. If you're on a cushion, you're sitting cross-legged somehow. If you're in a chair, you try to keep your back straight and keep your feet flat on the floor. If they don't reach the floor, then you can put them on a pillow, a cushion, or something. So then bring your mind inside and look at your mind. Just kind of feel it flowing along there. And think back to what you were doing like an hour ago. More what your mind was doing an hour ago, not your body. Then take it back a little further to when you woke up, when you got up out of bed. So that was your mind, right? Nobody else's mind. And go back to yesterday. And think what you were doing around this time yesterday. So today's Saturday, yesterday's Friday. Take it back to last weekend, last Saturday, say. Think what you were doing last Saturday. So just in that week, we've done so many different things. But behind it all, responsible for it all, really, is your mind. And go back a month, say, the middle of December. Then go back a year, December 2020. Think of all the things that happened in that year. So all in that year, that's your mind that experienced all those things that you did. And you went to bed with that mind, you woke up the next day with that mind. You spent the day with that mind, you went to bed with that mind, woke up the next day with that mind throughout the whole year. See how your mind stream, your stream of consciousness is flowing that whole time. So then go back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Just go all the way back through your life till you come to the first thing you remember. Can you remember being born? Can you remember being in your mother's womb? Can you remember where you were, where your mind was in your previous life? So as we see this, when we go take our mind back, as far back as we can remember, and see how it's operating during that time. So there's no reason it wouldn't be operating differently back before the first thing we can remember. And through meditating on mental continuity like this, even if it's just, in this things in this life that we can remember, we can see how our mind functions. One thought moment arising, dependent on the immediately preceding thought moment. So if our mind didn't come from a previous life, and the previous life's mind didn't come from life before that, before that, before that, before that, going back all the way to beginningless time. And the question then is, when did our mind start thinking? In this life, in the womb, or upon delivery, or when did we start thinking? What was the first thought? How did it arise? What caused it to change? So we call phenomena that don't change permanent phenomena, like empty space. It's just there, it doesn't have a cause. It doesn't change, it's just there. So while our mind is like empty space in that it's formless, no atoms, no molecules, no shape, no color. It's different because it can think. And there's one thought arising after another. So if we think about the nature of the mind and we meditate on mental continuity like this, we can get a strong feeling or understanding that this life's mind came from previous life's mind, and that this life's mind is going into next life's mind. Okay, so why is this important? When we first went to Zopa Rinpoche's Lam Rim courses at Kopan, my first one was in fall of 72, we had a textbook that had been put together from Rinpoche's teachings at the previous course. So the one I went to was the third course. The previous one was, have a guess, the second one. And so the students from the second course put together Rinpoche's teachings and made a sort of textbook for us to use in the third course. And then after that, Rinpoche revised the book and kept working on it for a few years. And we used that book at the subsequent Kopan courses, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe the 9th, anyway, up to the late 70s. Then Rinpoche stopped using it for some reason. I never really found out why, and started teaching differently. But up until that time, we used this book. And the very first thing in the book, the very first chapter was called "The Mind is Beginningless," and it was necessary to start like that because we Westerners came from a culture that didn't think that thought that the mind is beginningless is kind of nonsense, that the mind is a product of the brain's chemical or electrical activity or something, and even now nobody in the scientific world really accepts that past and future lives, that you've heard of the Mind and Life meetings these guys have been doing with His Holiness since we started maybe in the 80s. So His Holiness was meeting with psychologists and neurobiologists and physicists, all kinds of different people from the scientific world, so-called. And one of the early participants in those meetings was Alan Wallace. I think everybody, probably most of you, have heard of Alan if you haven't met him. Amazing guy, really smart. And he was one of the early students. He started in Dharamsala, I think, with Geshe Rapton. And so I went to some of these meetings, and one point after they'd had a few of them, I said to asked Alan, why, when all these Buddhists, there was Adam, and there was Thupten Jinpa, and there was Mathieu Ricard, and His Holiness, and maybe a couple of other Buddhists. So I said, why doesn't anyone, we're talking about Buddhist understanding of the mind with these people, why doesn't anyone talk about past and future lives? And Alan was like, we couldn't get any academics to participate in these things if we talked about such a sort of taboo subject. They would, if they even took it seriously, their academic position would be at risk. If they didn't have tenure, they probably wouldn't get it, and their careers would take a hit. So, and eventually he quit going to those meetings. I forget why. I think maybe the material neurobiologists kind of seemed to dominate them, or something anyway. So, we don't come from a culture that accepts past and future lives. So that's why Rinpoche taught it as the first thing to understand. So I don't know if anybody here has doubts about that, but and even if we agree intellectually, the way we live doesn't really reflect that we deeply understand that this life is just one of many. And still we're very much preoccupied with doing things to benefit this life without a lot of thought for trying to benefit future lives. And every time we do something that's just for this life and not for future lives, it's actually a negative action, creating a cause of suffering, even though we might think we're creating the cause of happiness by doing this or that, or earning money, or whatever we do. So if we think about the nature of the mind at these different points, and we meditate on them, think about them, contemplate them, and then we meditate on the continuity of mind and really get a feeling for it, we can see how impossible it is that the mind could have arisen from nowhere. I mean, from the brain, or without cause, just suddenly jumped into action without nothing preceding it. It doesn't work like that. We can see. Everybody knows karma, or karma this, karma that. Karma is one of the key basic teachings of Buddhism. If there's not past and future lives, karma doesn't make sense at all. There's no karma if there's no past and future lives. And all the things we experience and do in this life are the results, karmic results of karma mostly created in previous lives, not karma created in this life. The vast preponderance of karmic imprints in our consciousness, the huge, unbelievable mountain, although, it's not a mountain because it's formless, it's limitless because it's formless. Most of it comes from previous lives. The amount of karma we've created in this life compared to all we created in beginnings lives is basically insignificant, even though we can experience the results of karma created in this life. So, without past and future lives, Buddhism doesn't make sense. And nor does enlightenment, really. We're not going to get enlightened. Sorry if I'm bringing you bad news, but, most of us anyway aren't going to get enlightened in this life. So we're going to need future lives if we want to get enlightened. And if we don't believe there are future lives, then, trying to get enlightened is kind of useless exercise. Because enlightenment itself, once we get there, lasts forever. Okay, so that's just that bit. So now I'm going to look at a teaching by Geshe Rabden. It's called The Perfection of Concentration. I think this was a chapter in, where is it? One of back in 72, there were very few Dharma books available in English. And those that weren't particularly authoritative, especially on Tibetan Buddhism, because, it was pretty new in the West. People only really started to know about Tibetan Buddhism to any extent after the exile in 59, and even during the 60s, there wasn't much awareness of Tibetan Buddhism. But gradually, people became aware and more interested in it. And, since the 70s, it's kind of grown exponentially. One of the little books that was available was this this little booklet called Graduated Path to Liberation, which was a teaching given by Geshe Rabden in 1969 in Dharamsala. Probably translated by his main disciple, Gonsa Rinpoche. And this was published in 1972 by Cambridge University Buddhist Society. I don't know how it went from Geshe Rapton in Dharamsala to Cambridge, England, but it did. And then the end of 72, beginning of 73, this was available. And so one of the chapters in this little booklet is, Geshe taught on the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva path. And one of those is the perfection of concentration. So, that's our topic for today. So let's read a little bit of what Geshe Rapton said. So Geshe Rapton was a Sarah J. Lama. He came out of Tibet with so many others, including His Holiness and His Holiness's tutors, and Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche in 59. And he settled in Dharamsala. He was one of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's debate partners, and he was one of Lama Yeshe's teachers at Sera in Lhasa in Tibet in the 50s before they left. So he was one of His Holiness's debate partners in Dharamsala, and then he became one of the main teachers for a lot of the Western students who went to Dharamsala in those early days, 69, 70, 71, like Alan Wallace and and a bunch of those other students who were around there at that time, Stephen Batchelor and Brian Beresford and Glenn Mullen, people who translated a bunch of stuff that we benefit from today. Brian passed away quite a few years ago, Brian Beresford, but we were able to publish one of the first books of Geshe Rapton's teachings, along with Geshe Ngawang Dage, who was the teacher at the Tibetan Library, the first teacher there. And that book was called Advice from a Spiritual Friend. So it's a commentary on 7-point mind training and the Jewel Rosary of the Bodhisattva. So Brian translated and edited those 2 books, and that became the second book that Wisdom Publications published. Advice from a Spiritual Friend. Very nice little book. So, so Geshe Rapton was one of the main teachers of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. In fact, he was one of the main teachers at the refugee camp in Buxa, when the Lamas came out of Tibet. Many of the monks were sent to the Buxa Dwar. It was an old British fort. I think it was a prison, British prison. I think Gandhi or Nehru had been imprisoned there at some point. And so at 69, it was pretty run down and abandoned. So they kind of created a pseudo sort of monastery there as a first step of the Lamas getting used to their new life in India. I think a lot of them thought they'd be going back to Tibet soon, but it obviously didn't happen. So Geshe Rapton was giving teachings to some of the senior monks there, including Lama Yeshe, and one of his students persuaded, apparently with some difficulty, persuaded Lama Zopa Rinpoche to go and take teachings from Geshe Rapton, and Rinpoche was reluctant for some reason. And but anyway, eventually he went to a teaching by Geshe Rapton, and that's where he met Lama Yeshe, who was already a student of Geshe Rapton. And Geshe Rapton had 3 incarnate lamas. sort of finished up with 3 incarnate lamas in his care. It was Gonsa Rinpoche and Tom Rinpoche and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So apparently at some point he felt 3 Rinpoches is too hard to handle, he only wants 1. So then he gave the others away. So he gave Lama Zopa Rinpoche to Lama Yeshe and Tom Rinpoche to, I think his name was Geshe Tenzin Gompo. They finished up going to a center in Milan, Gepeling, probably in the 70s, I think. Geshe Tenzin Gompo and Tom Rinpoche. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce his name. And Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche met Zena, their first Western student in Darjeeling, and anyway, the rest is history. If you buy a copy of Big Love, you'll find it all there. So Geshe Rabten was an important figure in the development, really, of the FPMT, directly and indirectly. So on concentration, Geshe Rinpoche says, concentration is important in both Dharma practice and ordinary life. The Tibetan word for the practice of concentration is shine. I think in Sanskrit it's shamatha. Shi means peace, ne means to dwell. Shine then is dwelling in peace or being without busyness, not business, busyness. So, sometimes translated calm abiding or mental tranquility. There are different translators use different terms for shine or shamatha. If we do not carefully watch the mind, it may seem that it's peaceful. However, when we really look inside, we see that this is not so. Mind does not rest on the same object for even a single second. It flutters around like a banner flapping in the wind. No sooner does the mind settle on one object than it's carried away by another. Even if we live in a cave on a high mountain, the mind moves incessantly. When we're on top of a tall city building, we can look down and see how busy the city is. But when we're walking on the streets, we're aware of only a fraction of the busyness. Similarly, if we do not investigate correctly, we'll never be aware of how busy the mind really is. Primary consciousness itself is pure and stainless, but gathered around it are 51 secondary mental elements, some of which are positive, some negative, and some neutral. Actually, there are also 6 principle delusions. We talked about these gross and subtle obscurations before, so the gross delusions are divided into 6 principal delusions and 51 mental factors or secondary mental elements here. Am I doing something next month? So we'll look at a little bit more at these, next month if we live that long. Of these secondary elements in ordinary beings, the negative ones are stronger than the positive. Most people never attempt to gain control of these secondary mental elements. So actually among them, some are negative, some are positive. Included in those 51 are six principal delusions and 20 secondary delusions. So those 26 mental factors are by nature negative. Most people never attempt to gain control of these secondary mental elements. If they did, they'd be amazed at how difficult such a task is. Because the negative elements have dominated the mind for countless lifetimes, overcoming them will require tremendous effort. Yet Shine, mental quiescence or tranquil abiding, calm abiding, cannot be experienced until they've been totally subdued. Thus, the busyness of the mind is mind-produced. This means that a mental rather than a physical effort is required to eliminate it. Nonetheless, when engaging in an intensive effort to develop Shine, it's important to make use of certain secondary factors of a physical nature. For example, the place where one practices should be clean, quiet, close to nature, and pleasing to the mind. And friends that visit should be peaceful and virtuous. One's body should be strong and free from disease. This is kind of alluding to if we go into the mountains to do a retreat or some place, there are 6 factors that are important, including the cleanliness and quiet and pure, clean water and things like that. So this afternoon, if we get to it there, talk a little bit more about retreat and, trying to accomplish some of these things. We may look at those factors at that point. So the practice of concentration requires sitting in a proper posture, to which there are 7 points. So now this is going to be talking about, the professionals who sit on a cushion, not a chair or a comfortable couch. And but some of this can be translated into different sitting situations I mentioned before, like if you're sitting on a chair or something, you've got to keep your back straight and your feet flat on the floor or on some kind of support. Okay, so this 7 point posture he mentions, but it's called the Vairocana position. Vairocana is the Buddha of the fully, so there are 5 Buddha families, so-called, related to each of the 5 aggregates. So a sentient being, most sentient beings are composed of 5 aggregates: the form aggregate, which is the body, and 4 mental aggregates, which are the mind. So there's feeling, cognition, compounded phenomena, and consciousness. So I'm not going to go into those now. But when we purify each of those 5 aggregates, or skandhas, Sanskrit, Pungpo in Tibetan, when we become, or we achieve the Buddha of that fully purified aggregate, and the Buddha of the fully purified aggregate of form is called Vairocana. So he sits in this position. He's depicted sitting in this position, and the great translator Mapa, who was the guru of Milarepa back, some 1,000 years ago, Mapa used to go to India. He was called Mapa Lotsawa, the great translator, and he'd go to India and bring back Sanskrit texts and translate them into Tibetan. And his main teacher was the great yogi Naropa. And Naropa's main guru was probably the even more famous yogi, Tilopa. And so this lineage from Tilopa to Naropa to Mapa to Milarepa, and then Milarepa's disciples, Gampopa and Rechungpa, that sort of began the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. So there are 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism. Kagyu is one of them. Ours is called the Gelug, Lama Tsongkhapa's tradition. Then there's the Sakya and the Nyingma. So they say Mapa used to boast that, my meditation posture is the best in Tibet. Nobody has a better meditation posture than I do. So I don't know, he was 1,000 years ago, I don't know what Padmasambhava or his disciples, how they sat in meditation. So they're a bit of a lineage. There's the Buddhist lineage 200 or 300 years in Tibet before Mapa. But anyway, he used to extol the virtues of this position. Legs crossed, feet resting on the thighs with the soles turned upwards. So we call that, yoga, we call that the full lotus position or the Vajra posture. So I can't do it with my legs, I'm demonstrating with my arms. So, the back of the left foot goes on top of the right thigh, and the right foot crosses in front of the left. You see a lot of people do yoga, they do it the other way around, left in front of the right. I don't know exactly why they do like that. But in Buddhism, you see, Buddha statues and tankas and everything. You see someone's got forearm Chenrezig as their background picture there. Aida. So you can see Chenrezig has his right foot in front of his left, and you can see the leg position there. In that, can everybody see that? With the soles turned upward. If this causes too much pain, it distracts from concentration, in which case sit with the left foot tucked under the right thigh and the right foot resting on the left thigh. So that's called the half lotus position. So that's much easier for most of us to get into. If that's impossible, we can just sit with, our feet not resting on the thigh, but just on our meditation cushion. So usually we have two cushions that we sit on. One's called the zafu. I mean, this is from Zen. Big square cushion, and then on top of that is a little one called I think called a zabuton, or in English, a small cushion. So that lifts your backside up off the bottom cushion, and so then your legs are crossed whichever way you can manage. If you do the regular cross-leg position, with one foot under the other, then it's a little easier to get put pressure on your sciatic nerve and get pins and needles in your legs. So somehow full lotus and the half lotus position, avoid that. Two, the trunk is set as straight and erect as possible. So we have to keep our back straight. And sitting on a little cushion, lifting our backside up a bit makes it much easier to keep our back straight. So even though our back's straight, our neck is bent just a little bit forward, with the chin sort of a little bit drawn in. So our neck is bent such that if we opened our eyes and looked straight ahead, we'd focus on the floor about 3 feet in front of our body, about a meter in front of the body. That's how much the neck is bent. if it's too bent too much, it's too easy to kind of go to sleep, sort of, from, our mind to get dark and sluggish. If it's up, if it's too straight, it's too easy to get distracted by kind of a scattering mind. So neck bent forward, then arms formed into a bow shape with elbows neither resting against the sides of the body nor protruding. So not like this, but sort of a bit like that. And then the right hand rests on top of the left, palms upward with the tips of the thumbs touching. So that's down there. So then eyes focus downward at the same angle as the line of the nose. So normally we beginners close our eyes. But that does introduce the possibility of getting sleepy and dark and dull, because normally we associate closing our eyes with going to sleep. But if they're kept wide open, then it's too easy to get distracted. So if you look at pictures of the Buddha, I don't know if you can see on the Chenrezig, but their eyes are very slightly open. So you're not really focused on what's in your line of sight. But, if you have your eyes just slightly open, if you do this, you can see your hand moving. But normally we should be better concentrated on what we're meditating on so that we don't notice that. But having them slightly open lets a little bit of kind of light into our mind and makes it harder to go to sleep. And because they're not, more widely open, then we don't get distracted by things in our line of sight. So as I said, they're slightly focused inward down the line of the nose. Then the mouth and the lips are relaxed, neither drooping nor tightly shut. So our lower jaw is quite relaxed, lips are closed. That also prevents flies from going in your mouth. It was a bit of a problem in India and Nepal. And then your tongue is held lightly against, so the tip of your tongue touches the front of your hard palate behind your top teeth. So Geshe says, these are the 7 points of the correct meditational posture. Each is symbolic of a different stage of the path. Also, there's a practical purpose in each of the 7. Having the feet crossed keeps the body in a locked position. One may eventually sit for a long period of time in meditation, even weeks or months in a single setting. Imagine that. With the legs locked, one will not fall over. Holding the trunk straight allows maximum functioning of the channels carrying the vital energies throughout the body. The mind rides on these energy currents inside the channels. So there are like 72,000 channels. So keeping the channels working well is very important to successful meditation. So there's a central channel that runs from the crown of our head down to the perineal region. So we want to keep our central channel straight. It's blocked at places we call chakras, or wheels, literally, or they're kind of, the left and right channels run parallel to the central channel, but they twist around it, blocking it in, in the throat, heart, navel, sex chakra. So, more advanced meditation seeks to open these channels, unblock the central channel to allow energy to flow freely into it. But mostly in our life, it's secluded and we don't kind of have access. But keeping it straight helps. Keeping our back straight. The position of the arms, so like slightly rounded, away from your sides, also contributes to the flow of the energy currents. The position of the neck keeps open the energy channels going to the head and prevents the neck from developing cramps. If the eyes are cast at too high an angle, the mind easily becomes agitated, and if too low an angle, the mind quickly becomes drowsy. The mouth and lips are held like this to stabilize the breath. If the mouth is held too tightly shut, breathing is obstructed whenever the nose congests. If the mouth is held open too widely, breathing becomes too strong, increasing the fire element and raising the blood pressure. So usually in meditation, as long as we can, we breathe just through our nose anyway. Holding the tongue against the palate avoids an excessive buildup of saliva and keeps the throat from parching. Here it is. Also, insects will not be able to enter the mouth or throat. So it's said that when our concentration, as our concentration gets better and better, somehow the flow of saliva is stimulated. So again, at deeper levels of concentration, we don't want to be distracted by having to consciously swallow. So keeping our tongue at an angle like that just allows the saliva that's formed to flow down our throat, into the esophagus, so we don't have to swallow. So these are only the most obvious reasons for the 7 points of the meditation posture. The secondary reason, the secondary reasons are far too numerous to be dealt with here. See, I don't have enough saliva flow. Also, my tongue isn't resting for a moment. The secondary reasons are far too numerous to be dealt with here. It should be noted that the nature of the energy currents of some people does not permit them to use this position, and they must be given an alternative. But this is very rare. Although merely sitting in the Vajra posture produces a good frame of mind, this is not enough. The main work, that done by the mind, has not even yet begun. The way to remove a thief who has entered a room is to go inside the house and throw him out, not to sit outside and shout at him. If we sit on top of a mountain and our mind constantly wanders down to the village below, little is achieved. Concentration has two enemies: mental agitation or busyness, and mental torpor or numbness. Lama Yeshe called it sluggishness. So scattering and sluggishness. Generally, agitation arises from desire. An attractive object appears in the mind, and the mind leaves the object of meditation to follow it. Torpor or sluggishness arises from subtle apathy. developing within the mind. In order to have firm concentration, these two obstacles must be eliminated. So a person needs a candle in order to see a painting which is on the wall of a dark room. If there is a draft of wind, the candle will flicker too much for the person to be able to see properly. And if the candle is too small, its flame will be too weak. When the flame of the mind is not obstructed by the wind of mental agitation and not weakened by the smallness of sluggishness, it can concentrate properly upon the picture of the meditation object. So we have to strike a balance between distraction and dullness, sleepiness, sluggishness. So, a strong, steady flame is best for looking at something in the dark. This will come up, obviously, but generally speaking, there are two kinds of meditation. A very good book is Sangye Kadro's. Has she given talks at your centre, Kathleen MacDonald? So we published this in '84 for the first time. It's one of Wisdom Publication's most popular books. And in it, she talks about the different kinds of meditation and why meditate, what is meditation. So generally in Buddhism, we talk about two kinds of meditation: the stabilizing meditation or concentration, which is what we're talking about here. Concentration, stabilization, placement meditation, focusing meditation. 4 words for the same thing: single-pointed concentration, keeping your mind on an object without distraction, no matter what it is. So as Geshe Rinpoche said at the beginning, concentration is important in both Dharma practice and ordinary life. So being able to keep our mind on a single point. So that focusing or placement meditation, placing our mind on an object, keeping it there, stabilizing, keeping our mind stably on an object, focused on an object, concentrated on an object. That's one kind of meditation. The other kind of meditation is analytical meditation, where we analyze certain topics. For example, what we did before, mental continuity. So there's these different properties of the mind that I briefly mentioned. So we may have doubt that the mind exists in that way, or the mind has these properties. So we have to investigate that doubt. I think Aryadeva or Chandrakirti, one of the disciples of Nagarjuna, said, those who doubt powerfully have the potential to realize the truth, but only if they investigate their doubts. So doubt can be crippling, or maybe not. I don't know, should I get vaccinated or not? So, doubt, we have to investigate our doubts. See, which side of the equation is correct. So if we investigate our doubts, we have the potential to discover the truth. So that's what analytical meditation is about. We hear a topic for the first time, like mind is beginningless, past and future lives. Whoa, never heard that before. That can't be right. If that was true, I would have learned about it in school or university, or my parents would have told me, like that, But, all these millions, trillions, however many, not trillions, millions, maybe billions of Buddhists over the centuries have believed that the mind is beginningless. There are past and future, so should investigate this. So then, we analyze these different topics. So generally, what we're trying to develop, there are 3 levels of wisdom that we're trying to develop on our way to enlightenment. And why do we want to reach enlightenment? Because the purpose of our life is to enlighten all sentient beings. So first we have to get there ourselves. So we're motivated. Really, we're motivated. We have 2 motivations. The main one is to benefit sentient beings. And the second one is we have to benefit ourselves in order to be able to do that. So there's the wisdom of hearing, where, we hear something for the first time. Like, when we first got to Copan back then, and we opened this book, and there it is, first headline, chapter topic. The mind is beginningless. Like, what? So never heard that before, but there it is. We've heard, that's the wisdom of hearing. We've learned something just by reading it or hearing it for the first time. So not a profound level of wisdom, but sort of a necessary one. So then there's the wisdom of contemplation. So that's analytical meditation. We investigate, we try to resolve our doubt. We think about this topic. Mind is beginningless, mind, past lives, future lives. The mind is impermanent, product of causes, all these different little things to think about and try and understand, and to come to a conclusion. That's the point of analytical meditation, one of these 2 kinds of meditation. The point of analytical is to come to a conclusion. So when we come to a conclusion, and if that conclusion, especially if that conclusion is different from what we've habitually believed, what we've always been taught, what we've always thought, then we have to focus single-pointedly on that correct conclusion. On that wisdom, and have that wisdom displace the ignorance of that topic that's been in our mind since beginningless time. So it's easy to dwell in ignorance, in the wrong understanding, because that's what we've been doing since beginningless time. It's a very old and well-established habit. So if we want to replace that with a new habit of, functioning under the influence of reality, then we need to make an effort to displace ignorance with wisdom. And we do that through hearing about the wisdom for the first time, wisdom of hearing or reading, the wisdom of contemplation, thinking about that, is it this way or is it that way, and coming to a correct conclusion. And then developing the wisdom of meditation by focusing single-pointedly on that correct conclusion and having that become the basis of our understanding and activity henceforth. So that's basically how these 2 wisdoms work together. We hear about single-pointed concentration for the first time. Oh, what's that? then we think about it, understand what it is, being able to focus, as Geshe-la said, for weeks or months at a time, sitting in meditation without falling over. Sustained by psychic energy. You're not having to eat or drink or excrete. We may come to that in a bit. So, two kinds of meditation like that, enhancing each other. If sometimes we're concentrating and our mind doesn't want to stay on that object, we've analyzed, we've come to the correct conclusion, we focus on it, but our mind doesn't want to stay, then we have to employ sort of analytical meditation, just back off a little bit and remind ourselves of the benefits of developing single point of concentration, of generating the determination, the enthusiastic perseverance, the perfection comes before the perfection of concentration. Explain to ourselves the benefits of concentration and then come back to it. So they help each other like that. As well as analytical meditation leading us into the object of concentration, which is the correct conclusion of that particular topic. And the topics on which we meditate are generally, in our tradition, the stages of the path, the Lam Rim, the steps of the path. There are hundreds, even thousands of steps on this path to enlightenment. So each is a topic to hear about, to think about, to meditate on, and to realize. So our analytical meditation is done on the steps of the path, and our concentration is brought to bear when we reach correct conclusion pertaining to each of those steps. So that's how we reach enlightenment, gradually, step by step. In the early stages of the practice of concentration, mental agitation is more of a hindrance than torpor. So these two main hindrances, scattering and sluggishness. Scattering is more of an issue. Unless you haven't slept the night before, and then you try to meditate, probably sleepiness, sluggishness is going to be more of a hindrance than super interesting things coming in our mind, dragging it away from the object of concentration. The mind is continually flying away from the object of concentration. This can be seen by trying to keep the mind fixed on the memory of a face. The image of the face is soon replaced by something else. So, there are different topics of concentration, different objects of concentration. These stages of the path is one. These different topics I just mentioned are one kind of object. Another is what we did at the beginning, focusing on the breath. So, and a short meditation, at least on the breath, is usually how we warm up. So if you're going to run a marathon or some kind of distance, you want to do a lot of stretching and sort of warm up by stretching. Or if you're going to do weight training in a gym, you're going to warm up by doing some light weights before you get to the heavier stuff. So our warm up for meditation is often focusing on the breath. We come out of a busy situation, into our meditation room, we sit down, and we've got all that busyness that we came out of still buzzing in our head. So one way to, before we actually get into the business of our meditation that we're going to do, we can spend a few minutes just meditating on the breath to kind of calm and center our mind. So we sit in that position. And we find our breath going out, coming in through it, and we focus on that. Another object, it can be a visualization. So one of the early meditations we used to do at Kopan in those courses was the Guru Shakyamuni Buddha meditation. The FPMT have this booklet, Daily Meditation on Shakyamuni Buddha, How to Meditate on the Graduated Path to Enlightenment. So we visualize the Buddha. So this is a whole sadhana it's called a sadhana, sadhana, Sanskrit word, method of accomplishment. So it's a whole practice, take refuge, generate bodhicitta, 4 immeasurables, a few preliminary things. Then we visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front of us. So that's another kind of visualization. Or if we're doing Chenrezig practice, we visualize Chenrezig. You can see Chenrezig there. So we have to build up that image in our mind. So that takes quite a lot of practice and isn't necessarily easy. Some people who sort of more artistically inclined, painters and so on, often find it easier to visualize than people who are more in their heads and sort of academics or something. So we visualize, the deity, or we should visualize Shakyamuni Buddha and concentrate on that. But it's not a static image. It's a dynamic image with light rays coming in, and 3-dimensional, radiant. So there's a whole description. I was thinking we might do that, but I don't know if there's going to be time. So again, it's a visualization, but analysis comes in. So the analysis, when we're doing a visualization, we have to think about all the aspects of the Buddha. There's he's sitting on a throne, supported by 8 snow lions, 2 at each corner. So we have to visualize the snow lions like living, breathing animals. And then we visualize this big, bejeweled golden throne radiating golden light. And then there's a lotus on that, and then a sun disk and a moon disk, and seated on that is Shakyamuni Buddha. Then we have to see his face and his head and his arms and his robes and his body and all these different, his eyes, mouth, all these different aspects. So we try to keep that visualization in mind. And as it fades, we again analyze the image. And then when we've built it up again, we focus on that. And then we lose it. So then we have to build it up again through analysis, lines, throne, lotus, sun, moon, Shakyamuni Buddha. So again, analytical meditation and concentration work together. Halting this process of distraction is difficult because we've built the habit of succumbing to it over a long period of time, and we're not accustomed to concentration, putting it mildly. To take up the new and leave behind the old is always hard. Yet, because concentration is fundamental to all forms of higher meditation and to all higher mental activity, one should make the effort. I mean, if we're studying a kind of intensive text, we really, again, it's so much easier if we can concentrate. If our mind doesn't float off the page and think, oh, I forgot to do this, or after I finish reading, I have to do that. So we hear something. Oh, I wonder what that is. If we can just, even if we have good concentration, even when we're reading, it's so beneficial, especially if it's a complicated or difficult topic that we have to follow like a train of thought. And again, of course, when we're doing analysis, when we're trying to follow a logical train of thought, when we're trying to come to a conclusion, the better we can concentrate on each point of logic. Oh, because of this, there's this. Because of that, there's something else. So if we can concentrate well, it really helps our analytical meditation too. So again, they work together always. Mental agitation is overcome principally by the force of mindfulness. So mindfulness is memory, remembering what we're supposed to be focused on. So why does our mind go off our breath? Because it forgets. That's where it's supposed to be. We're trying to focus. We say, oh, I'm going to focus on my breath. Oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? We forget. So mindfulness is really just not forgetting, being mindful, remembering what it is that we're supposed to be focused on and not allowing our mind to go off that. And torpor, sluggishness by attentive application. In the diagram representing the development of Yeshe, okay, now here we go. Hopefully. I'm not very good at this. Sharing my screen. Where is it? Can you see that? Really?
Yes, we can, Dr. Nick.
Amazing. All right. So you've all seen this before, probably? Any of you? It's called the Yeshe chart, or like that. There's an elephant. The elephant symbolizes the meditator's mind. Once an elephant is tamed, he never refuses to obey. He never refuses to obey his master, and he becomes capable of many kinds of work. The same applies to the mind. Furthermore, a wild and untamed elephant is dangerous, often causing terrible destruction. Just so, the untamed mind can cause any of the sufferings of the 6 realms. So at the bottom of the diagram, depicting the development of concentration, the elephant is totally black. This is because at the primary stage of development of Yeshe, mental torpor pervades the mind, so that our mind is dark and sluggish. The monkey is in front of the elephant is a monkey representing mental agitation, or distraction or scattering, whatever you call it. A monkey cannot keep still for a moment, but is always chattering and fiddling with something, being attracted to everything. The monkey is leading the elephant. At this stage of practice, mental agitation leads the mind everywhere. Behind the elephant trails the meditator, who is trying to gain control of the mind. In one hand, he holds a rope, symbolic of mindfulness, and in the other, he holds a hook, symbolic of alertness. The rope, so you can see in his left hand the rope, mindfulness, and the hook of alertness in his right. At this level, the meditator has no control whatsoever over his mind. This is old school, it says his, but it could be her, and I'm old school, I find it very difficult to say their for the singular. So there we are. No control over the mind. The elephant follows the monkey without paying the slightest attention to the meditator. In the second stage, so we go up one, the second stage, the meditator has almost caught up with the elephant. So you see there's some other stuff, there's some flames and a couple of things in the sky, there's some fruit-looking stuff. I'm not quite sure if that's explained. In the third stage, the meditator throws the rope over the elephant's neck. So we see that going up the next, to the next, over the next, through the next curve. It's like snakes and ladders. So there's no ladders. The elephant looks back, symbolizing that here the mind can be somewhat restrained by the power of mindfulness. So you see he's looking back, and you know, in the second one, the elephant's head has started to get a little bit white. And here his head is completely white as the mindfulness increases. At this stage, a rabbit appears on the elephant's back. So we often hear about a monkey on your back, but in this case, it's a relative. The monkey's in front, and the elephant and the rabbit's on the back. This is the rabbit of subtle mental torpor, which previously was too fine to be recognized, but which is now obvious to the meditator. So this is kind of a subtle sluggishness. In these early stages, we have to apply the force of mindfulness more than the force of mental attentive application, for agitation must be eliminated before torpor can be dealt with. So mindfulness is still, remembering, bringing our mind back. It's called placement meditation because we place our mind on the object and then it goes off and then we have to replace it. So really it should be called replacement meditation. We just have to do it over and over and over and over again. Our mind goes off, bring it back. So boring. But if we don't do it, we'll never get enlightened. In the fourth stage, the elephant, so that's, here, can you see my cursor? There on the left, the fourth stage. In the middle of the picture on the left. So the elephant's, now the front part of the elephant's body is white too. In the fourth stage, the elephant is far more obedient. It's our mind. Only rarely does he have to be given the rope of mindfulness. In the fifth stage, the monkey follows behind the elephant, who submissively follows the rope and hook of the meditator. So that's here. You can see the monkey is half white. The rabbit is half white. It's starting to go white in the fourth stage. Fifth stage is about half white, and the monkey's half white, and the elephant's half white. And the monkey now is behind the elephant. See, in the fifth stage, he was in front, now he's behind. The elephant submissively follows the rope and hook of the meditator. Mental agitation, scattering, no longer heavily disturbs the mind. So we can keep our mind on the object for a longer period of time. In the sixth stage, it's here a little on the right in the middle. In the sixth stage, the elephant and monkey both follow meekly behind the meditator. The meditator no longer needs to even look back at them. So the meditator is just going along forward. In the sixth stage, the elephant and monkey both follow meekly behind the meditator. He no longer has to focus his attention in order to control the mind, and the rabbit has now disappeared. In the seventh stage, the elephant is left to follow of its own accord. So that's here on the right. This elephant's nearly all white, just the back of his leg is slightly shaded. The meditator does not have to give it either the rope of mindfulness or the hook of attentive application. So this is getting pretty advanced. The monkey of agitations has completely left the scene. Agitation and torpor never occur again in gross forms, and even subtly, only occasionally. In the eighth stage, it's here in the middle of this path. I'll bring it up to the top in the middle. The elephant's turned completely white. He follows behind the man, so the meditator is now in front of the elephant for the first time. And is now fully obedient, for the mind is now fully obedient. Nonetheless, some energy is still required in order to sustain concentration. So the monkey's gone. So in the ninth stage, the meditator sits in meditation. So here, top left, you see. The meditator sits, and the elephant sleeps at his feet. The mind can now indulge in effortless concentration for long periods of time, even days, weeks, or months. So these are the 9 stages of development of shine, or calm abiding, or shamatha in Sanskrit. The 10th stage is the attainment of real shine, represented by the meditator calmly riding on the elephant's back. Beyond this is an 11th stage in which the meditator is depicted as riding on the elephant, who is now walking in a different direction. The meditator holds a flaming sword. He's now entered a new kind of meditation called Vipassana, or higher insight, in Tibetan Lagtong. Higher insight. This meditation is symbolized by his flaming sword. So, like Manjushri or Lama Tsongkhapa have this sword of wisdom. The sharp and penetrative implement that cuts through the realization to the realization of emptiness. So now, going back near the beginning, at various points in the diagram, there's a fire. This fire represents the effort necessary to the practice of shide. Each time the fire appears, it's smaller than the previous fire. So we see it getting smaller and smaller until up here, it disappears. At each successive stage of development, less energy is needed to sustain concentration, and eventually, no effort is required. The fire reappears at the 11th stage. See up here, the top right, where the meditator has taken up the meditation on emptiness. So again, we have to put in some effort to realize emptiness. So, so we receive teachings on emptiness. We have doubt, we resolve the doubts, we think about them, we analyze, we do, the 4-point analysis of how things exist. And eventually we come to correct intellectual understanding of emptiness. And, we analyze our ignorant views of self-existence or inherent existence away. We analyze them away until they've gone. And then when we've analyzed inherent existence away, and we get a glimpse of emptiness, we focus on that, and it's gone in an instant. So again, we have to analyze and come to the conclusion that things do not exist as they appear. Things are not inherently existent. And if we've done it correctly, we'll get a glimpse of that. Again, we have to focus on that correct conclusion, and it only lasts an instant. So we have to put in quite a lot of effort, which those flames there symbolize. Also in the diagram are images of food, cloth, musical instruments. So, fruit, cloth here, musical instruments, there's cymbals, there's a conch. And a mirror. This round thing up here is a mirror. They symbolize the 5 sources of mental agitation. That is, the 5 sensual objects, those of taste, touch, sound, smell, and sight, respectively. So taste, down the bottom, you see these peach-looking things. Taste, touch, this is a cloth. Sound, these symbols. Smell, I guess this conch, it's like a conch on a sort of butter lamp offering bowl thing with smoke coming out of it. I guess that smell. I don't know what they put in the conch. Maybe the dead fish is still in there. That smell, and then sight is this mirror up here. So they show that the 5 sense objects in order of ease of getting rid of them as distractions. So food, taste, touch, sound, smell, and sight. Those in order of difficulty to get rid of the distraction. So most people take the mental image of a Buddha form as their object of concentration in order to develop shinne. First, I just talked about that, visualizing the Buddha. First, one must become thoroughly familiar with the object one focuses on. This is done by sitting in front of a statue or drawing of the object for a few sessions and gazing at it. Then try sitting in meditation, holding the image of the form in mind without the aid of the statue or drawing. At first, your visualization of it will not be very clear, and nor will you be able to hold it for more than a few seconds. Nonetheless, try to hold the image as clearly and for as long a period as possible. By persisting, you will soon be able to retain the image for a minute then 2 minutes, and so forth. Each time the mind leaves the object, apply mindfulness and bring it back. Remember what it is and bring it back. Meanwhile, continually maintain attentive application to see if unnoticed disturbances are arising. So when we're trying to focus on an object, I'm not sure if he mentions, but so we're visualizing the Buddha. 95% of our mind is focused on the Buddha, is mindfulness. We remember continually that that's what we're looking at. That's what we're focusing on, the Buddha. But then a little corner of our mind, 5%, 4%, is called watchful alertness. So it's like a sentry watching for impending distraction. So as we're mainly focused on the image, a little bit of our mind is there watching to see if any distractions, of taste, touch, sound, smell, or sight are beginning to appear across the horizon. And if we notice something, we deflect it before it has the chance to distract the main part of our mind, which is meditating on the object. So there are these two factors involved. Mostly it's mindfulness, holding our mind on the object of concentration. And then there's this little sentry watching for impending distraction and trying to get rid of it before it can distract the main part of the mind. Attentive application, he's calling it here. Vigilance. Just as a person carrying a bowl full of water down a rough road has to keep one part of the mind on the water and another part on the road, in Shinny practice, one part of the mind must apply mindfulness to maintain steady concentration, and another part must use attentive application to guard against disturbances. Later, when mental agitation is somewhat subsided, mindfulness will not have to be used very often. However, then the mind is fatigued from having fought agitation for so long, and consequently, torpor, sluggishness sets in. Eventually, a stage comes when the meditator feels tremendous bliss and peace. So here we see this monk, meditator, flying in the air. See? At the top left. Rinpoche calls this rapturous ecstasy. So, rapturous sounds good. Ecstasy sounds even better. Rapturous ecstasy is way beyond our understanding. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not what that is. Sorry. That comes later. Eventually, a stage comes when the meditator feels tremendous bliss and peace. This is actually only extremely subtle torpor, but is often mistaken to be the real Shine. With persistence, this too disappears. The mind gradually becomes more clear and fresh, and the length of each meditation session correspondingly increases. At this point, the body can be sustained entirely by the mind. One no longer craves food or drink. The meditator can now meditate for months without a break. Eventually, they attain the 9th stage of Shine, at which level the scriptures say the meditator is not disturbed even if a wall collapses beside him. He continues to practice and feels a mental and physical pleasure totally beyond description. Depicted in the diagram, okay, here we go, by a man flying. Here his body is inexhaustible and amazingly supple. His mind, deeply peaceful, can be turned to any object of meditation, just as a thin copper wire can be turned in any direction without breaking. The 10th stage of Shine, actual Shine, is attained. When he meditates, it's as though the mind and the object of meditation become one. That's the rapturous ecstasy right there. Now the meditator can look deeply into the nature of his object of meditation while holding all the details of the object in his mind. This gives him extraordinary joy. So, okay. Here, looking into the nature of his object of meditation means that he examines it to see whether or not it is pure, whether or not it is permanent, what is its highest truth, etc. This is the meditation known as Vipassana, or higher insight, Lagtong, Tibetan. Through it, the mind gains a deeper perception of the object than it could through concentration alone. Merely having Shine gives tremendous strength, it gives tremendous spiritual satisfaction, but not going on to better things is like having built an aeroplane and then never flying it. Once concentration has been attained, the mind should be applied to higher practices. On the one hand, it has to be used to overcome karma and mental distortion. On the other hand, to cultivate the qualities of a Buddha. In order to ultimately accomplish these goals, the object of meditation that it takes up must be emptiness itself. Other forms of meditation are only to prepare the mind for approaching emptiness. If you have a torch with the capacity to illuminate anything, you should use it to find something important. The torch of Shine should be directed at the realization of emptiness, for it's only a direct experience of emptiness that pulls out the root of all suffering. In the 11th stage on the diagram, 2 black lines flow out of the meditator's heart. So you see these 2 kind of, I don't know, whatever they are, up the top right. These things that look like railroad tracks. One of these represents klesha-varana, the obscurations of karma and mental distortion. So what I mentioned before at the beginning, the gross obscurations, ignorance, attachment, aversion, things that keep us in samsara. The burnt onions in the pot. The other represents Nyaya-varana, or Yun Shedrip, the obscurations. So is everybody still here? I can't tell.
Yes, we're all still here.
Sorry. So this is my phone. Other forms of meditation are only to prepare the mind for approaching emptiness. If you have a torch with the capacity to illuminate anything, you should use it to find something important. The torch of Shine should be directed at realization of emptiness, for it's only a direct experience of emptiness that pulls out the root of suffering. Did I say that? Yeah, the 2 black lines, I'm sorry. So I've nearly finished anyway. So you can't see that diagram now, but so these 2 black lines coming out represent these 2 levels of obscuration, and the meditator holds the wisdom sword of insight, Vipassana meditation, with which he plans to sever these 2 lines. Once a practitioner has come close to understanding emptiness, is on his way to the perfection of wisdom, prajna paramita, the ultimate goal of the development of concentration. Okay, so that's that. Sorry, I run a little bit over time. It's 2:15 or 12:15 over there. When do we come back?
What time would you like to come back, Dr. Nick?
Well, what is it, 12:15? Maybe 1:30?
1:30.
Is that an hour and a quarter? Is that enough?
Yes, that's when we were scheduled to come back anyway. So everybody okay with that? Good?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody.
So just think before we break that, we generated bodhicitta at the beginning, and we've been discussing the Buddha's teachings on development of concentration. So we've created a lot of merit in doing all that. So let's think, because of that merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. So we just dedicate the merit from this morning's session. Then we eat lunch with bodhicitta, and then we'll come back at 1:30. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Nick.